Previously on the Challenge All-Stars. I won my second mission in a row. I was medically disqualified under mysterious circumstances. I pole wrestled until I broke someone else's ribs again. And I got my ribs broken. Hello, other people. Thanks for tuning in to DVR Czar, the channel where TV rules all. And welcome to the Recap Corner. Today, I'll be talking about Season 2, Episode 7 of the Challenge All-Stars. For the first 41 minutes, I thought this was the best episode of the season, maybe of the entire All-Stars franchise. But for the last 4 minutes, I thought it was the worst. A big theme throughout the episode is lines being drawn, either in the sand or just into the ether.
There's definitely a line been drawn.
100%.
There is a clear line drawn in the sand.
The lines have been drawn in the sand as far as alliances in the house for the most part.
The lines have been drawn clear as day.
If there's clear lines drawn in the sand.
That was like a huge line drawn in the sand.
The division between the two alliances is the central focus from the beginning. We open, once again, in the middle of a King's Palace celebration. But this time, they've got a new member. See if you can spot her.
We just bossed up. Like, that's what we do. I'll go in any lion's den with this group of men and this woman right here next to me.
What? Yeah, so Jasmine's in the King's Palace now. Except she's actually not. Jasmine tells us via confessional that she's only pretending to join the King's Palace because her new partner, Laterian, is one of its core members. The only problem is that it seems like the rest of the cast thinks her joining the King's Palace is genuine, which means Darrell's alliance, John A. excluded, isn't protecting her, but neither is the King's Palace, really. It's late in the season. Her newness to the alliance, which she doesn't actually consider herself a part of, keep in mind, automatically makes her a bottom-rung member. For me, Jasmine's been one of the best cast members this season, and I really want her to make the final, but it kind of seems like she's in the worst position of anyone with no true allies except John A. At the same time, I'm not sure how much any of that matters since the game is being played in pairs. I've already spent way too much time on what amounts to about 2 minutes of the episode, but there's something so funny and almost childlike about the way the King's Palace operates. They're high energy, they're doing dances, being showy, annoying other people. Even the way Nehemiah explains the King's Palace's mission statement to Jasmine is over the top.
The way that we run, loyalty, we don't do that backstabbing shit.
It reminded me of a post that was on the front page of Reddit recently about a little kid who made a rule list for when his friends came over. And to clarify, I don't mean any of this as a negative. Are they being kind of obnoxious? Sure. But this is the challenge. Most people are kind of obnoxious at some point. And yeah, maybe it's not the smartest strategy to loudly reveal and or perform an original rap about your alliance.
Lay them down on the ground, take over your city, we own your town.
But I love that Tech did that. It's fun, it's bold, it's chaos born of natural causes. All things that have been largely missing from recent main challenge seasons. Next, we start to explore the smaller, more personal divisions that are happening as a result of the overall division between the King's Palace and the other alliance. You know, there's like half of me that really respects the other alliance for not naming themselves even though the King's Palace did. But then there's this other half, the half containing my love of symmetry, that absolutely despises them. Anyway, Brad realizes that he can't protect Nehemiah anymore if Nehemiah's going to be this brazen about his allegiance to a group that Brad isn't part of. The idea of the rest of the cast being almost forced into targeting King's Palace people is presented multiple times, and while I do agree members of the King's Palace like saying the phrase King's Palace so much they're like a Big Brother alliance from hell, didn't the King's Palace form because Nehemiah overheard MJ targeting him? These divisions, these lines in the sand, aren't in response to the King's Palace singing too loudly. They existed since the beginning of the season, maybe even before it was filmed. And I know I'm baselessly speculating for the sake of a joke I'm about to make, but if Darrell and Brad's alliance did exist ahead of time, then they're also a Big Brother alliance from hell. Taking a break from heights over water, this episode's mission deals only in heights. Sort of. The first thing we see is a challenge-branded monster truck. TJ arrives soon after, like this. Why does the main challenge series need so many explosions and over-the-top visuals when TJ can be this cool while wearing flip-flops? The mission is called Steer Clear, and it's my new favorite in a season full of other missions that were also my new favorites at some point. After slogging through some terribly formatted stuff during the back half of Spies, Lies, and Allies, it's a joy to be enjoying so many of these All-Stars missions. In Steer Clear, one partner gets strapped into a large arm that juts out behind the monster truck, while the other partner stands on top of the truck and has the ability to swivel the arm back and forth. As the truck is driven down a straightaway, cars and motorcycles continuously approach from the opposite direction, each with a pole of flags attached to their sides. The partner on the truck moves the arm so that the partner strapped into it is able to grab the flags. Whichever team collects the most flags wins. My immediate thought after hearing the mission explanation was that it sounded like a Mario Party minigame. Only in Mario Party, instead of flags, it'd be coins, and every third one would be like a Goomba or something. Melinda and Nehemiah go first. I don't know if Jody and Brad, as the winners of the last mission, chose the competition order. It seems like they did, since all the King's Palace teams are put at the beginning. Either way, at least we get Nehemiah doing this.
Save the palace, save the palace. Bruh, 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 bruh.
Out of the way early. Nehemiah also says that the challenge is all about big rigs, fast cars, and monster trucks, which I don't really think is true unless you're talking about Wes. Melinda and Nehemiah perform really well, which is especially hard to do when you have to compete first. The other standouts are Janae and MJ and Jody and Brad. For the second consecutive mission, Jody and Brad win, though this time they just narrowly beat Melinda and Nehemiah. I don't think Jody and Brad will win every mission, but I don't think it's impossible either. Jody's won 3 in a row, 4 total, and if she and Brad do make the final, they're gonna be tough to beat. As for the last place team, it's Jasmine and Latarian, but they have life shields, so the second worst team is sent to the arena instead, which is Ayanna and Tech. They do almost as bad as Jasmine and Latarian, so it's not like a duo that performed well was forced into elimination. And their poor showing also gave us this footage of Ayanna screaming. I don't want to take pleasure in someone's fear. That said, this is my favorite part of the episode. Also, if Ayanna was that scared, why didn't they put tech in the arm harness and have Ayanna control its movement? We saw her move 300-pound coffins in the arena earlier this season, so we know she can push it real good. Other highlights include Darrell reminding us that one flag could determine if you're going into elimination, followed by Melinda and Nehemiah losing by one flag and later being voted into elimination, which is a degree of foreshadowing so on the nose, I can't help but feel both insulted and impressed. And Melinda and Casey both show more fiery, competitive sides than what we ever saw in their original MTV appearances. For both, it includes a lot more cursing.
Does it get any fucking better than this right now? I mean, how badass do I look? All right, motherfucker. Fuck.
The back half of the episode showcases how the increased prize money has fundamentally changed the way players approach the challenge. After the mission, Nehemiah has a lot to say about friendship being more important than money. He expects Brad to protect him and Melinda from elimination because of their real-life friendship, despite their position in separate alliances. Although Nehemiah seems to willfully ignore that aspect of the situation. In early challenge seasons, when the prize money was a lot less, people would do things like volunteer for elimination or protect a friend even if it was detrimental to their own game. But now, with so much money at stake, it's unrealistic for Nehemiah to expect those same dynamics to still exist. Somewhere inside, he does seem to acknowledge that, since he starts preparing himself to be nominated by claiming that prior to filming, people warned him not to trust Brad. During their deliberation, Jody and Brad both want to nominate Melinda and Nehemiah. Since all other King's Palace pairs are either life-shielded or already going to the arena, Jody and Brad have to choose a team from their own alliance to be nominated as pawns, like Janae and MJ were last episode. Jody wants to pick Janelle and Darrell since they've yet to be nominated all season, but Brad convinces her that Casey and Cohutta are a better choice. His reasoning is that Janelle and Darrell are more likely to win a mission and could return the favor by keeping Jody and Brad safe if or when that happens. It makes sense to me, and to Jody too, apparently, because Casey and Cohutta end up nominated alongside Melinda and Nehemiah. I also think there's an opposite strategy where Jody and Brad could secretly try to eliminate Janelle and Darrell, since they'll probably be competition in the final. But honestly, Jody and Brad are so dominant, someone being potential competition to them isn't saying much. Regardless, this was my favorite deliberation segment in a while, because since Jasmine and Laterrian used their life shields at the mission, we didn't have to waste time watching them be nullified for the 4th episode in a row. After the nominations are public, Nehemiah feels hurt. He reminds people that he wore a glued-on beard as a show of support when Brad competed in elimination, even though we all know he wore that beard to spite Derek just as much, if not more, as he did to support Brad. He also claims that if the roles were reversed, he'd never nominate Brad, which is a really easy thing to say when the roles aren't reversed. Brad tells Nehemiah that he tried unsuccessfully to steer the nominations another way, which, based on the footage we see, is a lie. And it's a lie I don't understand why Brad feels the need to tell. Neither he nor Nehemiah thought they were aligned together. According to the edit, neither of them ever even tried to make an alliance or had a discussion about protecting each other. So why did Nehemiah expect to be safe? His reaction is basically a repeat of the first elimination cycle when he got all mad and entitled about Derek not nominating Ryan. Similarly, Janelle tells Melinda that she's going to vote her into the arena, which annoys Melinda because she never would have voted for Janelle. Ever. But why? Janelle starts the conversation by saying she and Melinda haven't talked game before. If they're not working together, not even casually, then why was Melinda so hurt by Janelle planning to vote for her? It feels like we're missing context. The whole scene is weird. Janelle says that the loud King's Palace celebrations are a giveaway that they're all aligned, and therefore Janelle can't vote to protect Melinda since Melinda obviously can't protect Janelle back. But Melinda seems to think that Janelle is just offended by the literal volume of their celebrations. I don't get it. Why is Janelle having basically the same conversation she told Brad not to have with Nehemiah? Later, we finally see the cast enjoy a night on the town. They're at a restaurant, seated middle school dance style, with the King's Palace people on one side of the room and everyone else way on the other. The King's Palace people start getting a little petty.
Wait. We can't laugh too loud. We can't laugh too loud. We can't have too much fun.
It's so funny that they think the other alliance's problem is the amount of noise they make, and not that said noise has revealed the fact that they're a tight foursome who will always protect each other first, which makes it pretty freaking difficult for anyone else to align with them. What started as laughter about laughing too loudly quickly turns into loudly complaining about the state of the game. Laterian's annoyed that people have competed in multiple eliminations this season, while others are about to finish their second All-Stars appearance and still have yet to go in. I appreciate the sentiment, but because one of the people who has yet to be in elimination is my all-time forever favorite, Darrell, I don't care. And unless production wants to revive the Skulls twist from the main series, which was, in my opinion, a mostly failed experiment, I think Laterian's wishing for something that's impossible to execute anyway. He also says that someone in the other alliance, I think MJ, but I'm not positive, has store-bought muscles, which really made me laugh because Laterian might be the originator of the popcorn muscles archetype we see on the show somewhat regularly. Eventually, the King's Palace gets even louder. The insults about the other alliance get more pointed, and Brad, the man who delivered the most iconic freakout in series history,
Here we go! Now it's a necklace! You like this?
responds like this.
I'm having a difficult night. I'm ready for the check.
My, how things change. The next morning, Brad apologizes to Nehemiah for nominating him and says he wishes their individual games had better aligned. Nehemiah accepts the apology. It's nice to see a genuine conflict be genuinely resolved quickly, instead of watching something manufactured get drawn out for multiple seasons in an attempt to create a storyline. Their resolution doesn't affect anything that happens in the rest of the episode, but it still felt too important not to include. At the selection, Nehemiah gives a speech about the name King's Palace.
I use the term king When referencing minorities, I use the term king to have them be a reminder that they come from royalty. It was for all of the people who don't ever feel like they have representation, making it far in the game, making it to the end.
Season after season after season of long-running reality TV competitions like The Challenge or Survivor or Big Brother have proven that the core aspects of these shows, casting, producing, and editing, are all historically carried out in a way that benefits white contestants. I don't think there's any way to dispute that in good faith. It's also something that should be talked about. I love reality competition shows, and because I love them, I always want them to improve. Creating a more equitable game is the most important way that can happen. Nehemiah's speech is confusing, though, when placing it in the context of the rest of the season. The edit depicts a clear one-to-one between MJ targeting Nehemiah and Nehemiah creating the king's palace in response. His goal of helping forge a path to the endgame for people who were rarely represented there isn't mentioned until this episode. Given the vast number of racist incidents that have happened on The Challenge, it's disappointing, but also disappointingly unsurprising that the editors removed this piece of the King's Palace's origins for most of the season. It's also frustrating that now that we're finally hearing about it, the show itself takes no responsibility for making it harder for Black people to win. The same thing happened during the most recent Big Brother season, which is also a Viacom CBS property. All summer, Julie Chen congratulated the Cookout Alliance on their success, never once acknowledging that the reason the Cookout needed to exist in the first place was because the show continuously failed its Black contestants for 20 years. Even though other cast members respect Nehemiah's speech, he and Melinda are still unanimously voted into elimination. Because that's what happens when everyone who's eligible to vote is also a member of the opposing alliance. In a callback to a callback, Nehemiah reveals that he too has slept in his uniform to help prepare for the arena. It's a good thing he did too, because this episode's arena is the toughest, most brutal, just absolutely dangerous. I've put it off as long as I can. We've got to talk about Casey, which also means we've got to talk about that worst part of the episode thing I mentioned earlier. When we first see Casey, she's FaceTiming her fiancé. She tells him about the emotional stress everyone's under and says that she especially is feeling testy, which is odd because she's not even on her period. We catch up with Casey again during the mission. She confessionals about not wanting to let Cohutta down by putting them in jeopardy of going home. Later, back at the house, Casey opens a dresser drawer, retrieves a pregnancy test, and delivers the following confessional.
I'm an accountant, so I've done the math. And at this point, I'm fairly certain that there's a very solid chance that I could be pregnant.
Then she FaceTimes her fiancé again, shows him a bunch of positive pregnancy tests, and they celebrate. You know what that means.
Safety palace, safety palace.
What's the challenge's deal with pregnancy and babies? First, all the way back in season 5, Baloo brought her baby on the show with her. And now, in the past 5 seasons, 3 of them, Total Madness, Double Agents, and All Stars 2, have cleared women to compete after failing to detect their pregnancies. It's a huge failure on the show's part. There's a scene in this episode where Casey is drinking a Red Bull. During Double Agents, Natalie and Liv had to wrestle people on top of a moving truck. It's fucked up! So yeah, Casey's pregnant. To clarify, That's not the worst part of the episode. The worst part is what happens to her partner, Cohutta, as a result. When I watched the episode for the first time, I was confused about who would go home. Neither of the nominated teams got an about to be eliminated edit, and when we finally arrive at the arena, there are only 5 minutes left in the episode, which is, at most, about half the time that's usually allotted for the segment. But at first, everything's normal. Ayanna and Tech and Melinda and Nehemiah enter the arena as if they're about to compete. There's a funny juxtaposition between Ayanna and Melinda. As they make their entrances, the editors put the sound of a roaring lion over a shot of Ayanna. And over Melinda, they put the scream of a terrified sounding woman. Then I noticed that the arena didn't have any equipment inside it. And then TJ reveals that that's because there isn't going to be any elimination. Ayanna and Tech and Melinda and Nehemiah are all safe. It's announced that Casey is unable to continue in the competition. This is another strange part of the episode. Earlier, Casey tells us that her future in the game is uncertain, which implies she thought there was a chance she'd get to keep competing and chooses to keep the pregnancy a secret so as to not affect anyone's vote at the selection. Turns out that was a wholly false narrative. According to Casey's interview on the official Challenge podcast, most of her castmates knew about her pregnancy prior to the selection, and the real reason she wanted to avoid elimination was because she thought it was the best way to ensure Cohutta could remain in the game with a new partner. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Even worse, the exact opposite does. After Casey officially announces her pregnancy, TJ decrees that since this is a team game, and because those teams are bonded together, Cohutta is also disqualified. And that's the worst part of the episode. Last time, when Kendall was also medically DQ'd, her partner Laterrian wasn't bonded to her. He got to obliterate Tyler in a pole wrestle and remain in the game with Tyler's former partner Jasmine. That's the precedent that was set. So why the change? I've seen some speculation that the difference could stem from Kendall and Laterrian already being voted into elimination at the time of Kendall's DQ, whereas Casey and Cohutta were safe, which kind of makes sense, but it doesn't explain why Tech and Nehemiah can't also compete in a solo men's arena, with Cohutta teaming up with the loser's partner. And that's just the solution I prefer. There are other ways to achieve the same result. And regardless of who was voted into the arena, there's no reason that Cohutta should be disqualified because production medically failed his partner. But ever the gracious showman, Cohutta is good-natured about his totally bullshit DQ and squeezes in one last classic Cohutta quip on his way out.
I'm pregnant.
It's not mine.
After they leave, I was already annoyed because Cohutta is one of the cast members I was most excited to see. And then TJ tells the cast this.
Well, just goes to show you, some people get eliminated without even seeing the arena.
Why is that being presented like it's a good thing? Or like a fun, unpredictable part of the game? Unexpected eliminations shouldn't happen, especially because the show accidentally cast a pregnant person again. And that's it. The cast exits the arena while we hear a professionally produced version of the Save the Palace song from the opening scene. Honestly, it's not bad. it's unfortunate that only 2 women have been eliminated without some sort of asterisk next to their name. And the 2 are Leah and Sophia, who were also the first 2 to go home. Since then, Katie sent herself to the arena when she quit the trivia mission. Tina didn't compete in her elimination against Melinda, and Kendall and now Casey were both medically disqualified. There are so many variations of the name King's Palace used throughout the episode. One that was used last episode but seems to have already faded is the 4 horse people. Then there's the original, the King's Palace. Laterrian adopts the tech-coined 3 Kings and the Queen. A new one from this episode is the 4 Kings, which I like because it takes the gender out of the word king. And finally, there's the 4 Kings plus Ayanna, which is my personal favorite, partly because of the aforementioned genderlessness, partly because it's the most complete explanation of who's actually in the alliance, and partly because it's very funny to have an alliance name that includes the name of a person in the alliance. There's an odd confessional where Jody explains that even though she seemed bossy during the mission, it was actually just her adrenaline and excitement. I'm wondering if a narrative about Jody being bossy is going to come up in the next couple episodes, because it didn't really matter at all during this one. Also, she wasn't being bossy either. Why do both Tech and Brad wear their hats so high on their heads after the mission? And there you have it. All my thoughts about the 7th episode of the 2nd season of the Challenge All-Stars that I could figure out how to convey mostly coherently. Want more challenge videos? Then come back next Wednesday. Until then, I'll be right here, staying ready for another recap by sleeping in my uniform.